This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Alright, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Nightwing News. Once again, we had an interview last week with Cal Higgins. This time, I'm excited, I am nervous, because we have a legend of the comic industry. You know him, the creator of Booster Gold, Doomsday, that's right, one of the people who killed Superman, that's right.
My son's fate character.
Oh, Doomsday.
Alright.
I mean, DC, Marvel, he's been everywhere. I think probably a character, there probably isn't a big character in either two you haven't touched, right? Mr. Dan Jurgens.
Hi, folks.
Well,
I'm excited. Yes, I'm excited. Like I said, all right, I know we have limited time, so I wanted to start with the Nightwing stuff. So the whole Ric Grayson thing, you kind of got thrown into the deep end on that, right?
Right, yes. Yeah, I mean, that is something that was well underway before I got there. They had already gone into it with a couple of other writers, I think at least 3. So, yeah, I kind of came into that one kind of like walking halfway or walking into a movie that's half over to a certain extent.
So, like, how much notice did they give you? Was it, like, short notice, or did you have, like, time to plot out your end of it?
Well, no, there was a reasonable amount of notice. That wasn't a problem. The problem was when they first started talking to me about it, they kind of said, you know, we're in this situation with the character. We have Ric Grayson. We have the 4 other characters who are claiming to be Nightwings. Rick has no memory of who he is, and we're looking for something that works here. And are you interested? What would you do with it? And I said, well, give me a couple of days to think about it. And I started thinking about it and kind of got a little bit captivated by the notion of what if you had essentially a Robin who had no memory of actually training under Batman, but still kind of had those skills. And I thought, well, you know, there might be something interesting there. So then we had a couple more discussions, and I said, all right, I'll give it a go, and we'll see where we can get with it. And see what we can do. And I jumped on board and, you know, started making some changes right away to try and pull things together a little more.
I mean, the story was fine before, but I don't know if I like the almost seemingly randomness of it. But then when you brought in the Court of Owls, I was like, oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, randomness is actually sort of a good word, because I said, you know, some of my initial questions were, well, was the KG Beast out to kill Nightwing? Did he just want to wound him? Did he know that, gee, if I put that bullet right there, he'll get amnesia? And sort of that's not really how amnesia and memory loss really work anyway. And then why all of a sudden, if you wanted him not to know where he was or who he had been, did he go to Bloodhaven instead of San Francisco? You know, and I had all these questions, and I thought, well, if I have these questions, the readers have those exact same questions. And I'll start to work those into the story. And I think by turning it into more of a plot that was driven by the Court of Owls, that involved Talon and some of these other things, that it started to just make a little more sense and become more of a Nightwing story.
Yes, 100%. Way to go! You saved the story, because I was like, "Oh, what's going on here? I don't understand." And then the Court of Owls came in, and I was like, "Now it makes sense. Now it's very smart. So way to go!"
Thank you. And, and the other part of it was that with the 4 characters that were stepping in for Nightwing, I thought that in a way they sort of detracted from the idea of a Dick Grayson, a Richard Grayson without his memory. And I said, there are so many different elements here that these things are just sort of all over the road. What can we do to really focus? And I said, I can work with 4 characters who want to be Nightwing. But to me, when you get into these stories where all of a sudden someone else is stepping in for whatever hero, whether it's Nightwing, whether it's, I don't care who it is almost, the story should be that if you want those heroes to be unique, that they can't do it, right? I mean, no matter how hard they try, if you have Dick Grayson, who spent years training and trained under one of the best tutors in the world ever in Batman, 4 people who are cops on the street just can't walk in off the street and say, "Hey, I'm going to be Nightwing," right? I mean, they start jumping from building to building, slip, fall, and die on the 3rd page. And I think part of it is then, okay, let's make that part of the story. Let's make it all work. And let's just see what we can do to elevate Nightwing himself, Dick Grayson, without, besmirching anyone else and, looking down on anyone, and just, again, make it more of a Nightwing story, even though he's not called Nightwing at this point.
Mm-hmm. So, he kind of got them to stand down, in issue 75. Are they going to keep appearing, or do you have further plans for them?
Oh, yeah, we're going to see them again. Okay. I just don't know that it necessarily means they're going to be dressed up in Nightwing costumes. Okay. But yeah, these 4 characters, there was a lot that was invested in them. So you will see them again right away next issue in 76.
And are we also going to see the Condors?
I would like to do something with the Condors again. That was something that came up really in quite a hurry. That, coming on Nightwing was not, but the Condors were, in that I think our last annual had come out like in spring of the year or something like that, and they wanted another annual, and they moved it way up on the schedule and said basically this was due last week. And I thought, well, what can we do? I want to do something that uses Nightwing with Dick Grayson being Nightwing at that point, and thought, okay, we can do a story that was set in the past. We had introduced one of the Condors in the storyline already, so let's take a look at who they were. But yeah, I think there's something that would be fun to explore down the road.
Anyone else?
I'm enjoying the conversation. I admit I'm a little behind on my Nightwing reading because I was really turned off on the whole Rick thing.
Yeah.
And, like Phil's kind of won me back over, and I was trying to catch up.
Oh, yeah, this man turned it around.
I have not caught up. I just wanted to be on the recording to get to talk with you.
Okay. That's cool.
I know you're huge. You two are also huge Superman fans.
So. Oh,
yeah. If you just look behind me, you can see some of my stuff.
Yeah, but I think, you had asked about the Condors, and part of it is I had mentioned the earlier annual, and it was really Nightwing Annual 2, where we brought in the Court of Owls stuff, and I think that's where everything started to come together, and I could drive it a little more for the reader, because part of it was I had to come on and sort of clean up a bit of what was there and make some of that function, and then it was really that annual where we brought in the Owls, and we could make it clear that this was a long-running plot, and we could introduce the idea that, the Court of Owls were just this fixture in Dick's mind going all the way back to when his parents were still alive, that things really started to come together. And again, kind of do what I said, which was, let's make this much more of a Nightwing story.
And, the story's excellent. Especially, you all had to deal with, again, the annuals were close together, and then you had the tie-ins like Year of the Villain, Joker War. did that kind of speed things up, or did you know exactly when Joker War was coming? How many?
Actually, what happened there is Joker War probably delayed the return to Dick Grayson a little bit. That we had actually planned for it to happen a little bit sooner, several issues sooner. And then when the Joker War came up, they said, well, let's be part of that. Let's use that a little bit as part of the reasoning for what happens. And that will take us right to issue 75, and it would be nice to celebrate as part of the character's, 75th issue. So I said, okay.
That's funny. That's what Phil said the whole time. I was like, oh, sure, it'll be soon. Now that we've got like a reason in the Court of Owls. And Phil was like, no, it's going to be in 75 because it's a big 75. Flagship issue. They're going to wait and do the big thing then.
And seriously, part of it was this, which was, when we first started talking about it, it is, if you have an idea for it, is there a way you can make it work, right? And I think then when I started playing around with the idea of, okay, what happens if the Joker got the crystal that the Court of Owls had used, and we kind of came up with this acolyte of the Joker sort of idea, where with the Dickie Boy idea, in essence, to do for a couple issues. And I said, yeah, okay, we can kind of fit it in with that, but often, Phil is right, that these things kind of get steered toward these anniversary issues. And the nice thing about that is, well, it can be off-putting in the beginning because it delays things. But at the same time, you get the extra page count, and that makes it kind of nice to be able to do, and gave us, again, a little more time to explore Dick Grayson's past.
And
and at least they said 75, and you didn't have to wait till 100.
Right, exactly, yeah. I would have
Too much.
I could not string it out that long. I would have been gone.
So, I mean...
Well, just real quick, Phil. And I think you already said it, but I just wanted to clarify. So it was your idea to tie it in with the Court of Owls. Like, that wasn't part of the plot. Okay, that's what I thought. And
right, 100%. No, one of the things I couldn't understand is when I came on...
to save it.
But it was more... It really was random. And that's what I struggled with, because when I first came onto it, as I said earlier, I had these questions that I assumed readers had as well. And I just said, well, I don't quite understand everything that happened here and the randomness of it, and where was Batman all this time that we cut the Dick and he's in Blue Haven, and why did he go there instead of any other city in the world since he had no memory? And if he wanted a clean start, why do we see him fighting the Scarecrow, to start with, and everything else? So the randomness bothered me right from the word go. And I tried to find something in all these disparate elements that I could pull together and make a story of. And when we first started talking about Year of the Villains and Talon, that's when I started going down the road of Court of Owls and trying to find a way to pull that in and have it all make sense.
Is it just the thing where, I mean, you weren't on the book at this point, so you might not know, but Dick got shot in Batman 55. So is it just a thing of, Tom King set this up, and it was just like, okay, whoever's working on the Nightwing book, you have to deal with this, the aftermath of this?
That's a little bit of what happened. It was Tom's thing that he did in Batman, but Tom is the first one to say that he had a solution for it that he could have gotten to. And I think what they decided to do is, rather than just have Nightwing as a title be uninvolved with it, is they said, okay, let's make it part of Nightwing's story, and let's use this in the book somehow. And that was the hard left turn that the book had to make. And Ben Percy was writing it at that time, and he was kind of thrown in the deep end.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's also how comics work. It's not like this totally unusual thing. This happens in comics. Oh, yeah. I won't say all the time, but it's not at all uncommon. And part of it is, okay, if there's a germ of an idea there, and I'd say that there is, in terms of, okay, Nightwing gets shot by the KGBs. Then if that's the problem, then the question becomes, okay, what can I find in that as a writer to work with and say about the character? How can I turn that into a good Nightwing story?
But does Dick Grayson hold a special place in your heart? Because I mean, like I said, I think you did a great job with the Rick story, but also, I mean, in Batman Beyond, you kind of changed what came before. I mean, now Dick Grayson's the mayor of Bloodhaven or Gotham,
right? No, it's I do like Dick Grayson quite a lot. I think he's this very interesting character because if you look at sort of the original reasoning of why he works as this counterpoint to Batman. And I'm so fascinated by this idea that if you go back and read Detective 27 and some of Batman's original stories, there is this darkness to those things, right? And from the moment that Robin shows up, it has this brighter sort of element that I find really interesting, that it was this immediate change in the series. So I think what's interesting to me about Dick Grayson and about the Robin character is the counterpoint representation that's there with Batman. I just find that very interesting and fascinating.
Well, I always say that, I think Dick Grayson, Robin, and later Alfred, helped to bring Batman the greatness, because otherwise he would just be like a loner muttering to himself in a cave.
Yeah. And I think there's certainly truth to that. They humanized him a little bit. And otherwise, he gets more remote. I mean, I know that once when I was still working on Superman, someone came up to me and said, well, wouldn't it be easier to write Batman because he's so human and Superman is this alien? I said, well, in a way, Batman is way more alien than Superman is. And Clark Kent is way more human than Bruce Wayne. So I don't know. But I did make that point.
Just made that.
Clark's a good guy.
That's a good point. That's gonna be my new sound bit. I'm just gonna play it everywhere.
All
right. What was I gonna say? But yeah, and then like I was saying, the Batman Beyond book, that's been doing well too. But that's coming to an end at 50. Is that right?
Yeah. Number 50 is the last issue, and I just turned in that script today. So that one is done and ready to go, and that one's been a lot of fun. I mean, between the two versions of it, the first of which spun out of Future's End, and then we transitioned to this one during Rebirth, it's actually been a lot of fun. It's been this nice little playground that has existed for us, where we could do a lot of things with some familiar DC characters that weren't necessarily bound up by continuity.
Sweet. Well, I know you guys are eager to get to other Superman stuff, so I always ask everybody, what's your favorite thing that you've written in superhero comics, in case you've done other kind of comics? What's your favorite thing?
Oh, my favorite thing that I've written? I don't know, because I've done so much.
Okay, well, what's something you really like? What should I read?
Okay, obviously, a lot of people are always going to reference the death of Superman and that kind of stuff. And I would even say the work we did as part of Rebirth on Action Comics and some of the stuff that we did when we crossed over with the Superman title, which Pete Tomasi and Pat Gleason were writing, I think that's some really strong stuff. I think it helped bring back kind of this core of who Superman is. I think the Superman Lois and Clark series I did that Lee Weeks drew, which really brought this married version of Superman and Lois back into the DCU and introduced John Kent, I think is really strong and still pertinent today, because that is kind of that part of the foundation that has gotten us to this point where we have John.
That's what I was going to ask about. I was waiting my time. I wanted to let Phil do his thing.
It's like we planned everything, right?
Superman questions.
I know, look at that segue. Oh.
Yeah.
Good job.
No, I wanted to point out that I loved your Lois and Clark run.
Thank you.
I loved that mini. You're very welcome. And the whole, so the year that came out, being in 2015 and everything, that's the year, my son was born.
Oh.
So reading, the Superman, that just, Superman as a dad, I loved. And just being a new dad myself and reading this, I thought was just great. And I loved just that whole mini series. I loved the convergence where, John was born and then into Rebirth Action. And I feel like Rebirth, Superman and Action, those two books together has been some of the best Superman writing in continuity comics in a long time.
Thanks. I appreciate that very much. And, I think we're all happy with the way it turned out. And this idea that Superman has been around since 1938. And I think the job of any writer is to always add to this tremendous legacy, this tapestry of the character. And, when I did Superman in the 90s, I think we really did that with the death of stuff and so many other things. And I think this time around, I wanted to add to it in a very different way. And they went along with this idea of John Kent and let us make him a permanent part of the DC universe. And this idea of Superman putting the black suit back on to kind of work behind the scenes in John's younger days and everything. It was just a lot of fun to be able to do. And Lee Weeks was just tremendous on the art. And I think it became very, like I said earlier, foundational to where Superman is now.
Was the John, when you took over, like when you were writing in Convergence and like John was born, were there plans to bring him in? Was like John, that idea, like did that come from you or did that come from editorial? Like,
oh no,
where did that come from?
In terms of coming from editorial, it was quite the opposite because when we had decided to do sort of the 5 years later stunt as part of Future's End and where is everybody now, one of the things they said is, all right, no kids. No one gets to have any kids if we're going to look at these characters 5 years later, because that's what everybody will come up with. So as we got into the Convergence idea, I did tell Dan DiDio that, if we have Lois give birth and there they are with young John, that child can represent the future of DC some way, somehow. And we didn't know how. I even said maybe the Convergence world dies and Superman and Lois put this child in a rocket and send him off into space, and he's soaring off to the stars, and that becomes your future somehow, and who knows what that'll be, but it's an idea that takes us down the road. And as we started working on it, there were various ideas for what would happen to John, and eventually it was part of, let's just bring that version of Superman back to the DC universe, because with the New 52 version, they had gotten to the point where that Superman and Lois really didn't have a relationship. They weren't married. It was a very different look, and I think a lot of readers were lost again. And again, it was part of that randomness and not having context for the character, because a lot of what they had known was now gone. And we were able to bring that back into place with Superman, Lois, and Clark.
And like I was saying, out of any other character, I love the idea of Superman as a father. I love reading those stories and him dealing with that. And, my son now loves Superboy, and I show him the John Kent stuff, and he gets a kick out of that. He doesn't like when he finds out there's Superboy that's young Clark Kent. He gets mad about that.
Okay.
But when you were given did you ask for it? Was it given to you to do the miniseries? Or did it just come about like, hey, do this so we can segue into Rebirth easier? Or was it always planned?
No, in a little bit, well, yes and no. I mean, the one thing I will always say is people want to think of creation as being like this straight line, and it never is. It's kind of up and down and back and forth, and one idea goes forward 2 steps, and then you jump back because it wasn't working, and then you start over again, and it's always sort of messy is what I'm saying. But I had introduced John as part of the Convergence event that left us with Superman and Lois and this young child. And by Superman and Lois, it was the more historical version. And as part of Rebirth, DC had made the decision that they wanted to get back to something like that. So this again is where Dan DiDio said, is there a way to do a series here? We kind of think, would you be interested in something called Superman, Lois, and Clark that tells us the next story in their life? And I said, well, sure, and here's what we can do. And we find out that the worlds have blended, and this Superman has been in the background on Earth all this time, wearing the black suit. And, you start having those conversations, and those conversations can end up leading to more. So it's not as easy as having the puzzle all figured out when you first start talking about it. And it's those conversations and those various ideas that develop and then take you farther down the road.
This will be my last question, Phil, and I'll give the power back to you.
Okay.
How was it writing, sharing like the Superman Reborn storyline? You did 2 issues, and there was 2 issues done from Superman and all tied together. How was that work together with doing like the red and the blue? Like, where did that idea come from of being like the way to bring it all together? Yeah,
the situation we were looking at is, so we had kind of gotten to the point where we had 2 versions of Superman. We had the New 52 one and the version I had done in Lois and Clark. And the question was, do we just have one left over or the other one left over, or do we somehow combine them? And the feeling was that if we combine these 2 versions, it's playing a little more straight with the readers. So we decided to do that, and it was as simple as Peter Tomasi and Pat Gleason and I, we all get along very well. And we just sat in a room with the editorial group and said, okay, let's bash this out. How can this work? And earlier, we kind of knew we were targeting that. So we had come up with this idea in my book where we had a very specific Superman and Clark Kent. And it was kind of like, how can you have Superman and Clark Kent at the same time? And it was Mixyez-Pitalik masquerading as Clark Kent. And that then, his efforts and his world is what gave us the solution to combining these characters and kind of turning that corner so that everything was back in place and able to work again. And I know it sounds really complicated, but it wasn't. It was just, let's use this magical imp named Mixyez-Pitalik, and he's our excuse to get us out of this hole that we were sort of in.
See, I think it worked great, and I don't know, did you guys look back at what Grant Morrison had done in Action Comics 1 when the New 52 launched? Just because I just reread, and I reread all of that into Rebirth. That was a task last year. But he has Mixie doing some things, and there was actually a panel in it where you see Superman Red and Superman Blue, and they're talking. And I messaged my friend like, "Oh my gosh, it's almost like they predicted what would happen back then at Rebirth." And I just want to know, like, was there ever like a reference back to that Mixie adventure before you guys wrote your story?
Not that I recall. I think part of it is more driven by this, which is when you go down the list of who of Superman's villains could have kind of devised some of this, there aren't that many, and Mixyez-Pitalik was a logical one. And of course, this whole idea of Superman Red and Superman Blue is one that was first introduced in the 60s anyway. I mean, we played around with it in the 90s. So
I got number 1 right over there.
Okay, well, yeah, it became a natural way to go, right?
I'm just impressed with how easily the name of that imp rolls off your tongue.
Oh, well, you spend enough time working on Superman and you get to learn it, right?
What were you calling Tyler? Mitzi?
I just call him Mixie because I get like stuck on the sounds, and I'm like,
yeah.
I sound more like I'm stuttering.
Okay. Here's a Superman question. I mean, is Superman, out of all the characters that you didn't create yourself, do you think you understand Superman the best just because you've written so much Superman?
Probably. I don't know if I quite think of it as understanding him the best. I think part of it is that understanding comes with the amount of work that you do. I think I have a very, very clear idea of the character. Almost as though if there's a situation with, that Clark Kent finds himself in or Superman finds himself in, I feel like I know the character well enough to say, yes, this is how he would react. This is what he would say. Now, that's just my opinion. It doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make me wrong, because other writers may very well differ with that. But for the most part, when you work that long with a specific character, yes, you kind of get to that point where you have that sort of understanding.
So you'd say Superman is probably one of the easiest for you to write now, just because you've developed that Superman muscle, I guess.
I don't, part of it is because I've done so much.
Or is it harder because you've done it?
It can be harder because I don't want to repeat myself. And if you don't want to repeat yourself, if you're cognizant and conscious about, cutting some new cloth at the same time and hitting some new areas, that actually can be harder. If you're working on a character you've never worked on before, like I say, everybody has, two great Popsicle Man ideas, right? And they'll all walk up to the editor of Popsicle Man and say, I have this great idea for Popsicle Man. And it's the greatest thing ever. And the conversation should be, yeah, we get it. That's a great idea. But then what do you do for the next 35 issues, right? And so with Superman, it's like, for me, I've done a lot. And it's, what can I say that's new that I haven't said before?
I was going to ask you, as a follow-up to that with writing, when you get a new character, do you already have a story worked out sometimes? Do you seek out a character to write about? Or just kind of like, hey, Dan, you want to do this? And you're like, okay, I got to figure something out now. What do you find more happens to you?
It happens very different ways. Ideas don't come from the same place, and you don't start on projects with that same way. And, sometimes I have started on projects and not had that specific idea until you develop an affinity for a character or an idea of who they are, because I think good writing comes from the nature of the character themselves. And so it's never the same way twice, is what I'm trying to say. And let's use Nightwing as an example. When I came on Nightwing, the first thing I inherited was just sort of this problem solving that I had to deal with, in that there were all these disparate elements on the books. Mm-hmm. That we had the 4 Nightwings, we had Rick not knowing who he was, and what is the relationship that they all shared, and he's a taxi driver, and there's B is part of it, and she owns a bar. There were so many different elements. The first part of it was just an element of problem solving and trying to streamline the disparate elements that were there and make them all start to fit together. And that took 4 or 5 issues. And then once I got into the Talon, the villain stuff, then I could set up the Court of Owls stuff. And that's when I finally got into writing character a little more. And it was, it would have been nice to be able to start with that, but it wasn't going to fit because that's not where the book was. So first it solved the problems of the book and then start to make it better. And it's what I at the time said, okay, first thing we're going to do is stabilize the patient. And then once the patient is stable, then we'll start to cure the patient. And that's kind of what that process represented. So it's not always the same by any means.
So do you wish they had just come to you from day one and be like, hey, Dan, can you start this whole thing for us?
It might have made it a little easier, yes.
Sure. So
is there a character that you haven't written at DC that you'd like to?
I think he's written them all, hasn't he?
I figured. That's why I'm asking.
He's written pretty much everyone.
Yeah, I mean, to one degree or another, I've worked on most all of them. I've always thought it would be fun to spend a little more time with Hal Jordan, for example. I haven't done a lot there. There are some other things that I'd like to do and some ideas that I would like to explore again. So we'll see if it happens. I mean, it's weird because sometime you'll have 3 or 4 different things you're really anxious to do. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, you'll realize that, man, that one idea I had for such and such a character, I'm glad I never got to do that because now that doesn't sound so good. And creation, let's again get back to this idea of what is creation. And it's never this straight line. And it's also a little bit like tides, in that there's a high tide that can come in where you don't want to do it because there's no room on the beach. And you kind of want to time everything just right, where it's a nice sunny day and there's plenty of room on the beach. And I realize that's a really silly metaphor, but there's some truth to it.
Well, I think isn't Grant Morrison leaving the Green Lantern book after this next run, I guess. But you've been there so long now, can you just go into them and say, hey, I have a Hal Jordan idea? Would they seriously consider giving you the Green Lantern book?
They might, but I doubt it. You never know. I mean,
business is cutthroat.
People kind of have the assumption that if you just snap the fingers, that they'll open it up. And, part of it is commitments are made very often to other people, and commitments to other ideas are made. And that's fine. That's kind of how it should be.
So are you saying they might already have Grant's replacement already picked out, maybe?
If there is going to be a replacement, they may, and I honestly don't know. I haven't asked about Green Lantern in quite some time, and part of it is because Grant and Liam have been doing just such wonderful work on that book, which has been so imaginative and so beautiful that as a reader, I'd hate to see them go.
Oh, yeah. Grant's always writing. Yeah, that. I loved his JLA run back in the day.
Right.
So, when you're done with a character, do you keep reading their book or do you stop and not read it? Like when you were done with Superman, did you read more Superman or were you like, I'm done?
I did a little bit, but in general, it's best to walk away. And part of it is to be fair to the next creative teams. I think it's important to let that be their space and to let them say what they want to say. And if people ask me about it, I have enough familiarity often with what's happening on a book to say, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And I wish them well, which is, always the case. It's not like I've ever left and said, well, I hope the next guy taints it, because that's not good either. But typically the best thing to do is just move on, to step back and move on to the next thing.
Well, is it the same or is it different? Like, say, Booster Gold shows up somewhere. Do you like take or you're like, I have to see what they're doing with Booster Gold since you created the character?
Yeah, that one's a little different. And part of it is because, when I created the character, even when they said, when he was put in Justice League, which I think was Justice League 4, it was because they called me up and they said, we're thinking of using Booster in the League. What do you think? And at the time, they had to explain to me that we're doing sort of this humorous take on the Justice League because their first issue wasn't even out yet. So they sent that to me. I read it and I just said, this is great. This is perfect for Booster Gold. So then we were able to talk about it. And, Keith Giffen and I were friends anyway. And so that was great to see them go do it. So by and large, I think it's nice to be asked because I have always made it a policy to do that with the creators of other characters when I've worked on them. And I think that's just within the creative community. If we're going to be straight with one another, that's the best way to do it.
All right. And now I'm going to change direction. These two are going to be lost. I love your Marvel stuff. I do a Spider-Man podcast. Hopefully next year I can get you back for your sensational issues. I love your Captain America and your Thor. My one other co-host, I don't know if you heard, there's a U.S. Agent miniseries coming out, and supposedly U.S. agents getting replaced by the government or something. And no,
I hadn't heard.
Yeah, but one of my co-hosts is saying it's Protocide. It's going to be Protocide replacing him. He loves Protocide. He always brings him up.
Okay. I think there's more there to explore if they ever want to do it, but I have no idea what that is. But I had a lot of fun doing that stuff, and I know that, just a day or two ago, someone showed me this really great-looking, sensational Spider-Man action figure that they're coming out with, and he comes with a Ben Reilly head, which looks really like Ben Reilly that I first drew, and I thought, wow, that's awesome.
I was going to say, was that your idea to dye the hair blonde?
Yes.
I was going to say, it's one simple thing, and it was just like, oh, yeah, he won't be mistaken. They look similar, but he won't be mistaken for Peter Parker. Yeah, like I said, I hope I can get you back next year for talk some Ben Reilly issues.
Great.
But are you DC exclusive right now then?
Yes, I am, and have been for a number of years now. So kind of once I got done with Thor and that stuff, I moved back to DC at that time and have been there since. And that was like 2005, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, Tyler, you got another question?
Yeah, I was going to wait till the end, but I mean, yeah. I just wanted to ask this one thing because this is something that kind of bothered me. With it being your character that you created, how do you feel, if you can say, about how John Kent was treated in the current run when they took him from being the boy, aged him up, and what they've done with him since?
Oh, I think there's this assumption out there that Brian, Michael Bendis and I don't get along or something like that. And the fact is we're friends.
I don't know. I just wondered.
Okay. So, No, and I think everybody sort of has that idea. That's not the case. When Brian first came to DC, he and I and a couple of folks from DC went out to lunch, and Brian was telling me right from the start his plans for the character and how he was going to age John and use Jor-El and things like that. I said, great, go for it. And part of it is where he wanted to get with John being part of the Legion of Superheroes, which I totally understand. And the idea that you would have a Superboy who is a core member of the Legion of Superheroes is very much what the Legion is all about. Those of you who know the Legion of Superheroes and its history. So I was totally on board with it. And I think there are always ways that if they wanted to do kind of a series of backstories that tell the untold stories of Superman and Lois and young John when he was still, 8 years old, that I think you could still have your cake and eat it too, that you can do both. But certainly I don't have a problem with this idea that you want to take John Kent as Superboy and make him this foundational core member of the Legion of Superheroes, because that's the history in a lot of respects of what the Legion has always been.
Makes sense. I hated that they aged him and took him away from Superman just because, like I said, I loved that story of Superman being the dad. And I hate that that's, gone. But
sure. And I understand that reaction too. And as I said, we've seen this many times in comics where there's been, this untold tales of whatever character, whether it's Batman or, we've seen that many times. And I think there still should be a way to do some of those stories for the people who like that version. But that doesn't mean you can't have both somehow. Because again, it's comics. We should be able to do a lot more than we do that way.
Nothing's permanent in comics, even death. I mean, look, Dan worked on the most famous example of that.
So I heard.
Well, yeah, and also you could tell a time about anybody's life. I mean, they're like with Dick Grayson, they're always making up new stories where it's like, oh yeah, this happened when he was Robin.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's part of why we read comics, right? We fall in love with these characters. We fall in love with the relationships that they have among themselves, and this is what we want to capitalize. It's just like in Nightwing 75 with these beautiful pages that Travis Moore drew, which is, here's Dick and Donna and Garth getting back together again, and thank you. Yes. And we see the old Titans together on the phone, and they have these discussions. That's one of the reasons that we love Dick Grayson. And that's what we love about comics is these histories that these characters have shared together.
All right. You probably can't answer this question, Kristen. I'm surprised you didn't ask this. You're not killing B, are you?
I knew he wouldn't be able to answer. He can't give away things like that.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. I think you just have to wait and read issue 76.
Okay.
You can't just drop spoilers like that. Jeez, Phil.
And you don't have an...
You can always ask. I don't have to answer. You can always ask.
Okay.
But yeah, I think...
They're not planning Nightwing Red and Blue, are
really
they?
Important happens in Nightwing 76. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Yep.
And you don't have an end date, right? You're still going on with 76, 77, onward, right?
We're working on 77 right now.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, because don't you guys get a short break? What is it, January and February for, what is that, Future State?
Right.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Any other questions, kids?
Are you writing anything for Future State? I am
not, no. I am working on a project called Generations, which is going to come out the same months as Future State, January and February, which is we open up with this great 80-page special, which starts to take a look at various different timelines in the DC universe. And not various different timelines as much as I should say various different times in the DC universe. And if you would have seen the cover art that is out there for the book called Generations Shattered, we have a team of characters with Booster Gold, Starfire, Steel, Sinestro as a Green Lantern, Commandy, and a couple of others that I think turns into this like fun story that addresses a lot of different things that have happened throughout DC's time as a publisher.
Cool.
Sweet. History stuff is always awesome.
Yeah, and I think it is. And we have a tremendous lineup of artists on it. Since it's 80 pages, obviously different hands had to jump in and pitch out. And we sort of kicked it off with a story in Detective Comics 1027 that I wrote and drew, that Kevin Nolan inked. And this sort of starts to show different versions of Batman and then takes us into that as we follow the original Batman who appeared in 1939, kind of moving in with the rest of the DC universe.
So that's out in January with the rest of the Future State then?
Yeah, it's out in January.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Okay.
All right. And is there any other projects you want to promote while you're here?
No, I think that's it for now. And, thanks for hanging with us on Nightwing. I know there were a lot of people who wanted to get back to Dick Grayson and away from Ric Grayson. And we were always aware of that. And as much as anything, we didn't want to make it abrupt to the point where it didn't make sense. We wanted to tell a really good story that touched on his past and was meaningful to the character. And that's what we were all about. And thanks for hanging in there with us and going along for the ride.
I can't emphasize enough, once you brought the Court of Owls in, it all made sense and it totally saved the story. And I thought, oh, well, if this had been clear at the beginning, I would have liked it a lot better.
Yeah, thank you. And seriously, that's really what my entire goal was, to get us to that point. And then that's what allowed us to work through so much else. And that's why this had to go full circle with the KG Beast, and why he had to be there at this end, and why he's in 75 and 76, because that was the natural way to go. And, issue 76 is titled The Thing About Napkin Man. And if you all remember, when Dick was shot, it was because the last thing he started to say is, that's the thing about Napkin Man, and then boom. And that's the title of issue 76, and why we had to bring it full circle.
I can't wait to get to that punchline. We've been waiting so long.
It's in there. It actually is in there. Okay, so just to tell a little tale out of school. Do we have 2 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so just tell a little tale out of school. I got in touch with Tom King, and I said, Tom, what the hell was the end of that? What's the end of that joke? What is the thing about Napkin Man? And he said, why do you want to know? And I said, well, here's why. Because it's going to come back up. And I said, he never got to finish that. So he finishes it in Nightwing. And I went right to Tom, and we talked it out.
He made us wait a little over 2 years for that punchline, huh?
Yeah, man.
I hope it's worth waiting for.
But yes, again, Dan, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. You're now a friend of the show. If you ever want to come back and promote, or even just shoot me a line and say, hey, Phil, can you mention this on the next episode or something? Yeah, please.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So what was your cat's name? I saw the kitty walk by.
Oh, the cat's name is Nightwing.
Nice. Okay. You don't have a dog called the KG Beast, I hope. Okay.
Oh. No, I don't. I don't have a dog. The dogs are too much work for me.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, on that note, thanks for the time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
For your time.
It was great.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Okay. We're all good? If we are, I'm going to duck out. Got a call to take.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
See, Phil, I was trying to be good.
I know, but see, we got a lot of Nightwing, got a lot of Superman. That's good.
The man has so much history. Like, you could just keep asking questions, and then he says something. You're like, "Oh my gosh, I want to ask about this now," and you're going to keep going. But I'm like, must hold back.
Again, he's been in comics since the 80s. So yeah, he's written a lot.
I mean, Solomon loves Doomsday. So just he wanted to come down here with me, and I was like, "No, buddy, you got to stay upstairs." So just
That's what I said. I hope I can get him back again, just because I had even all his Marvel stuff I want to talk to him about. I mean, Death of Superman could just be its own episode.
I mean, just the history of even talking about just his experience with just watching the changing of comics and the things he said about having an idea, then redoing the idea in a different way. I mean, doing Superman, walking away, then coming back and kind of doing a similar thing and doing more of that Superman years later. So, whew, that was.
Well, I know. All right, so
I'm trying to read backwards on a lot more of his Nightwing, because when I saw he was writing it and I jumped back in, but I gotta get caught back up. So
yeah, I was reading his run. They try to refresh myself. I think it's his. I think his first issue is 59. I think, and then 75 just came out last week. So
all right, Nightwing 59.
That's awesome. A little. Yeah, that's over a year.
Yeah.
Time. I can't even tell you how time has just passed. I feel like something just happened, and then you're like, wait, that was almost a year ago or a year ago.
Also, though, 2020 is so many years packed into 1 year.
Yeah.
That yes, on the one hand, sometimes I think, wow, it's only been a year, and then sometimes I think, wow, it's been a year.
And especially with comics, I mean, we had a 2-month break on comics.
Yeah.
Where they weren't putting any out, so yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
So we got that digital first, and that one's started.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of them, like Nightwing, they weren't publishing, so.
Yeah, we should have asked, since he's been around so long, if he thinks they'll ever go strictly digital. I mean, I would doubt it, but.
As long as the money's there, I'm sure they'll keep, I do, yeah. All right, should we get out of here? Everyone digest what we've just learned.
Yeah.
But for those although both of you were admirably restrained and not too much Superman or non-Nightwing, so
yes, good job.
Good job.
I can talk about either of them. I just wealth of knowledge to ask.
All right, but hey, those of you listening at home, you think 2 interviews is good? Well, stay right where you are, because next week we're going to be talking to Tim Seeley, so that's going to be 3 in a row.
Wow,
that's right. So, yes, come back next week for Tim Seeley talking Nightwing Rebirth, and Grayson.
That's right.
So, send your questions in now for Tim Seeley. Email us capesandlunatics@gmail.com or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And remember to follow Nightwing News on Facebook, Twitter. Follow all the Capes and Lunatics social media. You can find all of that. Links to this YouTube. You can watch the video on YouTube. Go subscribe. Links to the Patreon where we talk Star Trek. Links to merch. Everything all in one convenient place. That's Linktree, linktr.ee/Capes and Lunatics. And remember to support our sponsors, Tweaked Audio, Hunt a Killer, Pod Life the Book, Volume 1. Go pick it up now in digital and paperback, because Volume 2 is coming with a certain Mr. Tyler Patrick in there for Volume 2.
Can't wait. I can't wait for it to come out, because I can't wait for Phil to read what I wrote about him. There's gonna be tears. Just.
I love you too, man.
He's gonna call me up like that.
And hey, it's 2020. There's nothing to do. Well, you go pick up Pod Life the Book. Also pick up Dick Grayson, Boy Wonder, put together by that woman, that mad woman, that crazy person right there. So if you love Dick Grayson, go pick it up. All right. And you can pick all of that up on Amazon. And when you do, use the link for Southgate Media Group right down there in the show notes. Help support this show, the Southgate Media Group Network, and that crazy man in the tattered bathrobe, Rob Master Doom Southgate.
Make it rain, so says Master Doom.
Please kick me in the pants.
From the old detective issue. That's right.
Yeah, we should have put that one on our list for next year.
Oh yeah, or Batman.
I'll go find it and we'll add it in somewhere.
Batman tells Robin to kick him in the pants. Yes.
Yeah, I know I've got it.
No one else got added.
Diggity dink.
All right, so yes, 1 week, Tim Seeley. I believe you're joining us again, right, Tyler?
I plan to.
He's like, I don't care about you people. I like talking to the famous people.
I like talking to you guys. I'm just trying to make it work.
Oh, yeah.
Mondays are actually a little easier because Ginny is off work on Mondays, so that's usually our family day, so it's a little easier.
Back to our regular time next week.
Regular
Yeah, it
wing
was
time,
funny.
regular wing channel.
That's right. So, yeah, that's right. Join us next time. Regular wing time.
Regular wing channel.
Nightwing News. Fine, crazy. Thank you, Dan.